Will the Dems ever win again, as long as they keep hating men? Our video of the day is a 2-for-1 man haters special. First up, Michelle trashes dudes while urging women to act more like them.
We're always hedging, because in the back of our minds, we weren't raised with the certainty of maleness that, kind of the confidence that young men in their 30s have, which they haven't earned. They just have it.
But it's something you work at, I feel not confident sometimes, and then I work on it, and I can feel more confident. But nobody's really confident.
Yeah.
Everybody's insecure.
Everybody's a
at some
basket
point.
case.
Nobody wakes up and is like, unless you're like a true stone cold psychopath at any age, really.
Yeah.
And I think, what she's talking about is maybe there are the men out there, they're like, women, when you get older, you're gross, like, ew. But like, those are men who are not having sex with anyone.
Yes.
And I truly do not care about the opinions of those men, and I have a lot less money than she does.
Yeah.
So really,
Are Democrats setting themselves up for another loss by constantly going after men? In today's video, we're looking at 2 moments that sparked a lot of backlash. First, Michelle Obama makes comments about men and confidence while encouraging women to be more like them. She suggests that men tend to act confident even when they haven't really earned it, while women spend more time doubting themselves. But honestly, nobody walks around feeling confident all the time, and saying men have some built-in advantage doesn't really help the conversation. Then Timpf steps in and points out the irony behind the whole thing.
Even if they run Michelle. According to a new poll, Michelle Obama isn't as strong a Democratic candidate against former President Donald Trump as many Dems would have you believe. In a hypothetical matchup, my favorite kind, Trump wins with 47% of the vote compared to Michelle Obama's 44%. I guess some of the kids whose school lunches she ruined are finally old enough to vote.
It also represents that Democrats continuing to be out of touch with the same group of people that voted for Trump, which is why they lost. Some people are feeling like there's no hope because of Donald Trump going to be the president, but some people are feeling hope for the first time in a long time. A lot of the people in those flyover states who haven't had their concerns addressed by President Obama and the administration before that. So sure, some people are feeling hopeless, but to say all Americans, like you were saying, if this continues, Democrats are going to keep.
Michelle Obama goes on to say that as women get older, they're often made to feel unattractive or unwanted. But she also brushes those opinions aside, saying the criticism usually comes from men she wouldn't care about anyway. And sure, that's her perspective, but the whole conversation starts to sound less constructive and more like another round of finger-pointing. Then Gutfeld jumps in, and he definitely doesn't hold back. With his usual sharp sarcasm, he takes aim at Michelle's carefully polished public image and jokes that even if Democrats decided to run her for president, things might not go the way they expect.
Michelle Obama surprised fans on our new podcast by saying her pet peeve about her husband is that he's chronically late. For example, we're still waiting on him to admit he's from Kenya. And as for Barack's pet peeve about Michelle, he's mad that she keeps leaving the toilet seat up. When she cleans it.
According to a recent poll, Donald Trump comes out ahead with 47% compared to Michelle Obama at 44%. Gutfeld joked that maybe the kids who couldn't stand Michelle's school lunch policies finally grew up and started voting. But underneath the joke is a bigger point about how disconnected many voters feel the Democratic Party has become. To supporters, Michelle's speeches may sound motivating and empowering, but to a lot of everyday Americans, it can come across as more lecturing than listening. Critics argue the party spends too much time focused on identity politics while missing the concerns of voters who helped put Trump back in the spotlight.
Have to use our voices to make these choices clear to the men that we love. Our lives are worth more than their anger and disappointment.
What's that pitter-patter sound I'm hearing in the background? It's the footsteps of Barack running to vote for Trump.
The voters in Middle America who feel like nobody in Washington is really listening anymore. Michelle Obama has spent years as one of the main faces of the Democratic Party's uplifting, inspirational image. She's known for polished speeches, emotional stories, and motivational messages. But critics like Gutfeld and Timpf argue that it all feels a little too rehearsed and out of touch. They point to her luxury lifestyle, high-priced speaking tours, and massive book deals as proof that her image doesn't always match the everyday struggles she talks about. Some even joke that tickets to her events cost more than a month's rent in the community she claims to represent. And of course, there's also the ongoing joke about her constantly calling out Barack Obama for always running late.
But Michelle Obama says the deportations keep her up at night. So maybe there is some truth to Barack's birth certificate. And way to tip off Trump. Oh, please, I'm really worried about these deportations. I mean, just get a divorce already. Don't try to get him deported. There's a lot of conflation going on here. Deporting illegal immigrants isn't this.
Greg Gutfeld even turns the long-running jokes about Barack Obama being late into another sarcastic punchline. He keeps the commentary sharp and provocative, the kind that grabs attention fast and pushes back against what he sees as media-friendly narratives. Greg also argues that Michelle Obama says she wants to stay out of politics, yet somehow always ends up weighing in on major political conversations with another polished speech or carefully crafted message. Then Timpf joins in with her own sarcastic take, joking that Michelle's inspirational style can sometimes sound more like an attempt to pressure people into voting a certain way than simply motivating them.
Julie, she says women are invisible. Which women are she talking about? Oh, I see her women in commercials, in TV shows. They're all over the place and they're all yelling at everybody, telling them, I'm a woman.
She's got some serious issues. She needs to go to therapy.
Yes.
And maybe stop doing radio just altogether, because we don't want to hear her speak. But she talks about, how young men were confident, which makes sense because she seems like a pretty confident person growing up.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, you tell me. But I will say this, and I do believe she's actually biological female. She just plays the role of a man really well.
Greg Gutfeld wraps things up with another sarcastic joke, imagining Barack Obama hearing Michelle's latest comments and deciding to run off and vote for Donald Trump instead. It's the kind of over-the-top humor his audience expects, but underneath it is a bigger criticism. To people like Gutfeld and Timpf, Michelle's public image feels less natural and more carefully managed over time. They argue that even her memoir tour came across more like a celebrity event mixed with political messaging than a simple book release. Their bigger point is that Democrats may be pushing away voters, especially men, by sounding more judgmental than relatable. Critics say that instead of connecting with frustrated Americans, the party often comes across as lecturing them. And if that approach doesn't change, they believe the political losses could continue. The criticism doesn't stop there. Gutfeld and Timpf also joke that Michelle Obama sometimes delivers motivational lines that sound more polished for social media than genuinely inspiring. They acknowledge there's nothing wrong with writing a memoir or sharing personal advice, but they argue that some of the messaging can feel overly packaged and rehearsed rather than authentic.
Our minds, we weren't raised with the certainty of maleness that, kind of the confidence that young men in their 30s have, which they haven't earned, they just have it. We don't start feeling that and owning that until our 50s and 60s, at a time when we start to be treated as invisible in society.
So true. And it reminds me of my new book, Women Are Invisible at Age 50, and I couldn't be happier.
Michelle Obama spoke about struggles and challenges women face, but critics like Greg and mocked the message as out of touch. Gutfeld used sarcasm to point out what he saw as contradictions in her comments, while Timpf joked that Michelle's speeches sometimes sound more like polished motivational talks than relatable real-life experiences. They also pushed back on her claim that women over 50 become invisible, arguing that successful women remain highly visible across media, business, and politics. Overall, the critics say Michelle comes across less like an everyday person and more like a polished political figure trying to connect with ordinary voters.
Michelle thinks American men suck.
Let me warn you, your rage does not exist in a vacuum. If we don't get this election right, your wife, your daughter, your mother, we as women will become collateral damage to your rage. To the women listening, we have every right to demand that the men in our lives do better.
Greg and also took aim at Michelle Obama over her healthy eating campaign and public image. They joked that her school lunch programs felt more forced than inspiring and argued that many of her speeches come across as preachy instead of relatable. The critics also questioned her claim of staying out of politics, pointing to her documentaries, speeches, and public appearances as clearly political. According to them, Michelle's image feels highly polished and carefully managed. while everyday hardworking people rarely get the same attention or praise despite carrying real-life struggles on their backs every day.
Has shown her allegiance to this nation, not by spewing anger and bitterness, but by living a life of service and always pushing the doors of opportunity open to others. She understands that most of us will never be afforded the grace of failing forward. We will never benefit from the affirmative action of generational wealth.
Generational wealth. Something good that now in the prism of liberal politics is very...
Critics argue that Michelle Obama comes across more like a carefully managed brand than someone truly connected to everyday people. They say her message often feels polished and glamorous, but disconnected from real-life struggles. In a recent podcast, Michelle spoke about men needing to do better and warned that women could suffer depending on the outcome of future elections. She encouraged women to expect more from the men in their lives, but critics felt the message sounded more divisive than helpful. Timpf also mocked Michelle's podcast style, joking that many episodes sound more like motivational quotes turned into speeches than honest conversations about serious issues. Critics further argue that Michelle tries hard to appear relatable while still living a lifestyle most ordinary Americans could never imagine, pointing to things like luxury events, major media deals, and private jet travel as examples of the disconnect.
A liberal groundhog, Obama's popping up to warn us about how Trump's turning into a dictator.
We start drifting into something that is not consistent with American democracy. It is consistent with autocracies. We're not there yet completely, but I think that we are dangerously close to normalizing.
Critics say Michelle Obama tries hard to appear relatable, but her lifestyle often feels far removed from everyday Americans. They argue that talking about ordinary struggles while traveling privately and living in elite circles creates a disconnect many people notice. Gutfeld also points to her strong ties to Hollywood and major media projects, saying her public image is carefully shaped and protected through documentaries, interviews, and large media deals. Some critics believe Michelle's calm and polished speaking style can come across less like encouragement and more like subtle judgment. They also argue that while she's often presented as being above politics, she has remained deeply connected to political conversations for years. To supporters, she's an inspiring public figure. But to critics, the media treats her more like a cultural icon than a former First Lady, giving attention not only to her speeches and projects, but even to her personal style and public appearances.
Men can't name masculine Democrats. So, Congresswoman, according to a new study by a think tank, young men struggle to name any masculine Democrat leaders besides Barack Obama, saying it's the Republican Party that best represent men's interests. Are you surprised by this? Where did the Dems go wrong?
Critics argue that Michelle Obama is often treated more like a celebrity brand than a political figure. They say the media praises everything from her speeches to her fashion choices while rarely challenging her directly. When Michelle warns about Donald Trump and the future of politics, critics like Gutfeld and Timpf argue that the message feels overly dramatic and carefully scripted rather than focused on clear solutions. They also joke that Michelle's public image has become so polished that even small things like her outfits or personal advice get treated like major cultural moments instead of ordinary commentary.
Meanwhile, here's former First Lady Michelle Obama last night.
Kamala has shown her allegiance to this nation, not by spewing anger and bitterness, but by living a life of service and always pushing the doors of opportunity open to others. She understands that most of us will never be afforded the grace of faith.
Michelle Obama often presents herself as someone above politics, but critics argue she helped shape the very political system she now criticizes. At the same time, many young men say they no longer feel represented by today's Democratic Party. Some even admit they struggle to name strong male Democratic figures outside of Barack Obama. Because of that, they feel the Republican Party speaks more directly to their concerns and frustrations, and critics say that shift says a lot about where modern politics is heading. In the end, this whole debate is bigger than just Michelle Obama. It's about how political parties connect with everyday people and whether voters feel heard or talked down to. Supporters see Michelle as inspiring and thoughtful, while critics view her as polished, disconnected, and overly political. And if Democrats want to win back frustrated voters, especially young men and working-class Americans, critics argue they may need less lecturing and more real connection.